درود علی یا مظهر العجائب.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا حبيب الله العالمين أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. ما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Goodness, this is the last session of the Nahjal Balagha Book Club. So I thank all of you for being on this journey and for benefiting, inshallah, for being the benefit that I have received from it. And I hope that the journey we have taken continues on after this book club, as we, continue to read Nahjal Balagha and develop these themes in our own way. But I want to start off by saying what a pleasure it has been to be a part of this journey with all of you. So thank you, and thank you for sticking till the end. Alhamdulillah. Okay, it's kind of emotional, isn't it? Okay, so the book club. We set ourselves an aim or a target in, I think it was week 2, after we had an introduction to what this book is and what we can find in it, which was to understand about moral decision making, right? How do we choose what's right and wrong? How do we use our mind and understand Islamic sources to, when you're in the thick of it, to know what is the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do? And in the course of doing that, how do you strengthen yourself to choose the right thing and to practically embody the kind of behavior the Imam expects from all of us? This was put to a vote, and this topic came on top, including Quran and Tawheed and spirituality and a few other issues that we were interested in. We had a very interesting quiz, if you recall, right? So we began by looking at moral decision making. We found that the heart, the qalb of the human being, of insan, is where you have this internal struggle of right and wrong, right? And whether it's the shahwat or the voice of shaitan or the desires or this dunya or any of those forces, they all wish to govern what you choose to do with your life. And on the other hand, you have your aql, your reason, you have knowledge, ilm, and of course the allies in the form of the Quran and the Ahl Bayt and the Sunnah and the Holy Prophet and all of these things which are here to help you in your path towards God. And in walking this journey, we want to strengthen the latter over the former. So we looked at examples of how to strengthen this unit of decision making. Okay, we looked at the Holy Prophet being a source of medicine for the heart when it becomes ill and is choosing the wrong options and cannot help itself. We find that the Prophet helps in this journey. We looked at examples like the brother in faith of the Imam who has passed away before, who the Imam misses because he only spoke when he had something to say and he was silent most of the time. If you remember, what was the line? I used to have a brother in faith and he used to do all of these things. We looked at that example. And we looked at Abu Dhar. And Abu Dhar was another example of a man who strengthened his internal decision making to the extent where he was prepared to suffer for its sake, where he went through hardship and pain because it was worth it to do the right thing for him. So now we start to understand the idea of strength and what it means to be strong on this journey. And of course, there are things that are going to get in our way, like this dunya, and we have to have zuhud, abstinence against it, hence the previous sessions, as to how to remain consistent on the path of the follower of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And when you strengthen your heart, you then find yourself in different environments acting differently. Okay, so last week we looked at when you're in a social environment, right, with people, whether you're in someone's home or whether you are in with friends or you are in a community, you need to make sure your social interactions are for the sake of God. Me and my family, me and my friends, all of these things go back to my relation to Allah Azza wa Jalla, and I need to link these things together. And the more that we find examples and environments to test ourselves, we find more and more opportunities to turn back to God. So the workplace is a place to be back to God. The home is a place to be back to God. The family is a place to be back to God. And what we learn from Nahjal Balagha is that the Imam has spoken about such a variety of themes and so many different options of where you're going to be in life. And he's given you what it means to go back to God in those environments to prove to us that the stricter a moral decision maker you are, the more you will find opportunities to find God in places others aren't even looking for Allah Azza wa Jalla anymore. And that's what Nahjal Balagha does for you. It opens up your eyes to new environments, new places that you can be in yourself. And maybe it opens up a new lens on how you regard yourself. Okay. In this final session, we want to look at the public life and the political life as the final place where, or at least the most extreme or highest level, where we are testing our decision making. Like, I'm trying to do the right thing when it comes to how do I treat other people in politics? How do I deal with governance and governors and those who I govern? How do I treat businesses if I'm in control of them? How do I, if I'm an employer of people, how do I treat those people under whose control, who are under my control, my ra'iyah, as we're going to see? How do I act in those environments? And we have to then test all of the things we've looked at before in terms of the qalb and the heart to see what it actually looks like in the practical world. Okay. And for that, we chose what might be the most famous excerpt or section of Nahjal Balagha, maybe, is Imam Ali's letter to Malik al-Ashtar. Yeah. So this is letter 53 of Nahjal Balagha. All of you know or have heard about this letter. George Jordak studied it and loved it so much. The UN, in the United Nations Developmental Index of one of the years, they had an excerpt of the letter in the report, and some say they hung it up in one of the buildings of the United Nations to prove to people what governance looks like, in the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's not just these examples. In general, the letter to Malik al-Ashtar is famous and it deserves to be well known because it has in it so many gems of how the governor and the leader should act. Now, for me and you, I would like to go through it, looking for examples of what I should do based on this letter. So I'm not looking at thinking, what's the history of it? Malik al-Ashtar is being sent to Egypt. Imam has sent him. There are Banu Umayyah were there in the past. Malik al-Ashtar has to change their approach. We'll come back to the Imam. That's all true, but that's not our topic. Our topic is me and how I become a better and more autonomous agent for God. So when we go through this letter, I'm going to pause at certain moments and say, well, if you're in this environment, or how does this link to your life that you're in right now? Okay. So first what I'll do is I'll introduce the letter and I'll point on those sections which show to us the link between political activism and personal spirituality, just so you know how closely these things are linked for our series. Okay. And then I'll go through a very famous saying, which all of you will have heard. It's from this letter. That person is either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. It's from here. We'll see how the Imam says it and what it means. I'll then ask you a question, and then I'll go through 7 groups of people the Imam speaks about, 7 classes of people. And he speaks about them in telling Malik that, Malik, when you're governing the army or the judge, this is what you should tell them. Okay. But for me and you, I'm not Malik al-Ashtar governing a society, right? I'm living my own life. But in each of those 7 groups, there is a lesson for us if maybe your employment or your studies are linked to that particular group. So I'll pause and say, well, maybe if you're studying this topic, you might find wisdom in this example. And I'd really like and encourage yourselves to reflect on what you want to do in life. Like, what is the job that you want to do, for example, or how do you see your life panning out? And in terms of your social responsibilities, like, what kind of public life do you want? Whether it's employment or family or representing Islam or any of these things. And see how the Imam instructs Malik to ordain those different roles in his time. And maybe there's lessons for us today. And when I come to those 7 different groups, I'll mention what those jobs are that you might be doing. And think to yourself, if I really want to go into this career, can I do it for the sake of God? Is there a way that I can do it? And if my Imam's giving me that advice right now in letter 53, do I have it in me? And do I have what it takes to embody the type of business person the Imam wants from me, the type of doctor the Imam wants from me, the type of physio or business person or lawyer? Like, can I be the type of person, parent, or for example, or carer? Is it the way the Imam intends me to be, how he told Malik to instruct his other people in this time to be? Okay. Now this letter is really long, so I'm not going to go through every section. So if you are interested, there are lectures on this on the YouTube channel on which all these sections are uploaded, and there are loads of content on letter 53. But let us quickly go to the beginning of the letter, just to set into scene why we are so much interested in it. Are there any questions or anything before we begin? Any points that anyone wants to make? Are we good? I'm in Muharram clothing because I'm filming like majalis and things like that throughout the day after this. And any podcast series as well, actually, on Ashura, which is going to be coming out for the 10 days of Muharram. So that's why, I'm not like mourning the end of the book club. It's not like that. And it's Eid tomorrow as well, although Shahad last night. It's not like that. I'm just in between different projects right now. Just so in case any of you are wondering, why is Abbas mourning? Is it the end of the book club? It's not that. I'm actually very, very happy to spend this last hour with you, inshallah. Okay, so if you're paying attention to the text, please go to letter 53 of the letter to Malik al-Ashtar. Um, if you have it in English or Arabic or whatever, it's fine, but go pay attention to the beginning, okay? Right at the start. So in the beginning, it's هذا ما أمر به عبد الله علي أمير المؤمنين. So this is the Amr from Ali ibn Imran to Malik al-Ashtar. Like after that section, when it's been introduced that this is to Malik, you are now the governor of Egypt. You must collect the revenues, fight the enemies, and seek the good of the people. After that part, how does the Imam begin in speaking to Malik al-Ashtar? What's his job? And think about why we are interested in moral decision making and personal spirituality. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Amrahum bitaqwa Allah. Ali has ordered Malik to have taqwa Allah, to have fear or recognition of God. وإيثار طاعته, and have obedience towards him. واتباع ما أمر به في كتابه, and follow all that has been commanded in the book. من فرائضه وسنن, whether it's fara'id or it's sunan, whether it's obligation or whether it's the example to be followed. التي لا يسعد أحد إلا باتباعها. And without following these things that are in the sunnah and the book, one cannot have success or virtue. ولا يشقى إلا مع خدودها وإذاعتها. And one cannot save themselves from evil by ignoring the guidance from the book, right? And the sunnah which is coming. إن ينصر الله سبحانه بيده وقلبه ولسانه. So help Allah with your heart, with your qalb, and your hand, yad, and your tongue, lisan. Help him with your heart, first of all. And then by helping him with your heart, you'll then be able to help him with your body, right? فإنه جل أسمه. And this is because Allah's name is glorified. His name is great. قد تكفل بنصره من نصره. And Allah Azza wa Jal helps the one who helps him. وَعْزَازِ مَنْ عَزَّهُ. And he gives honor to the one, or protection to the one who tries to protect his name. وَأَمَرَهُ أَنْ يَكْسِرَ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الشَّهْوَاتِ. And he orders that person's heart, or he helps that person's heart to break away from its own desires. وَيَزَاعَهَا عِنْدَ الْجَمَعَاتِ. And this is because he restrains the heart when it feels like having excess or increase. فَإِنَّ النَّفْسَ أَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءٍ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ اللَّهُ. Because the heart is going to be inclined towards nafs al-ammara, the nafs, the part of your desires which are guiding you towards your desires and your shahwat, except what rahmallah, except the one who God had mercy upon. All right, let's stop right there. If I had mentioned this section in one of our previous lectures, it would fit into a discussion on qalb, on spirituality, on all of those things. And here it is in a discussion on politics. Do you see the wisdom? Right in the beginning, before we can come to governing people and what an Islamic government looks like and politics and all those things, it's Malik. Watch your heart. Watch your qalb. Make sure that your tongue and your hands are working for the sake of God. Don't forget the sunnah and the fara'id of the kitab. Do you see what comes first, guys? Like that has to be first. And we don't get to have a discussion on politics and all of those interesting societal issues unless we have dealt with the core part of our heart. And here's the most important part, or that I find most interesting. Allah will help you in fighting against your desires. Isn't that the issue we're facing, all of us? That our desires want one thing and our mind wants another thing for us, and we're trying to balance these two in that battle in the heart. He says, if you help God, He will help you. So doing social activism for the sake of Allah and working at yourself so that you can be a present member in society, you are not alone in this. The moment God sees you striving to do His bidding in the public life, He helps you. And the way He helps you, we have mentioned, is that your heart, which has certain desires, He helps you in dealing with those desires. He helps you in making sure that they are restrained. And when they are going ahead, He brings it together. So when you're going to find yourself going over the edge because you are being led by love of dunya or love of some pleasure or love of a toxic person or something like this, something practical, He will hold you back because you're doing His work. But of course, the condition is the first part, that you do ata'ah of Him, you do obedience of Him. وَإِيثَارُهُ مَا أَمَارَهُ بِهِ الْكِتَابِ. You are following the fara'id of the book of God. You start there, and that gives you your strength. Okay? Something which we're facing an issue right now is about social activism. People talk about this a lot. And they're asking questions like, what's the point? What's the point of being an activist, being involved in political issues in, Palestine and Yemen, all these things, if someone doesn't pray or someone doesn't even, care about religion that much, right? And this issue comes up because we don't want to discourage people from doing very good public actions. It's very important to stand for the oppressed. But in your own personal journey, even your activism comes from a place of spirituality. It should come from somewhere. It doesn't come from an ideology that we have, like a political view that because I belong to this political party, I'm going to go on that protest, or because I'm very convinced by leftist ideas, I believe in solidarity, I'm going to go and stand for the oppressed. These things are true, but that's not where me and you get that feeling from, not in its core form. We get that feeling of helping them mustadafin, those who are weak, wherever they are, whatever condition they're in, because of this issue. We have submitted our hearts to God. And by making our hearts humble, we are already and naturally inclined to help those who Allah wishes us to help, to be a nasir for the one who calls for us. And that increases our deen by being socially active. Okay. Any questions or points on this first part? Sister Zahra, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to say something? Was it my imagination or was the hand raised? It really looked like it. You can type. That's fine. Go ahead, sister. Was there a point that you wanted to make? Oh, I see. I see. The hand was to pause me from going ahead, literally to like say stop, and then you can have time to write. So should these two then? So let me know, like, was it what the what your thoughts are? I'd love to hear them, inshallah. Should these two be done in conjunction? So you mean the personal, private spirituality and the public activism, right? Or do we have to fix ourselves first? This is a very good question. This is such a good question to start us off with. So the question is, do we have to fix ourselves internally, in our own spirituality before we do all those public activities, or should they be done together? I have some ideas on this. Does anyone else would like to comment on the question? Anyone will give any answer to that? Come on, you guys are going up for Palestine. You're retweeting these issues. You're doing all of the stuff that is expected. What do you think? Do you think your private spirituality comes first, or you do these things together? So Brother Pajwak, Assalamu alaikum, by the way. Good to have you back in the book club. Well, did you have a potential answer to this issue?
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Alaikum salam.
Sorry, I missed your previous sessions.
Agha, we missed you terribly, but alhamdulillah, you are here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Alhamdulillah, I could attend. Yeah, so basically, in an answer to that question, certainly before we enter any activities, this is also a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam to Komel, where Imam Ali alayhi salam says there is no movement, or there is no move that you want to make, and you are needless of this knowledge and wisdom for it. Okay, so yes, certainly, before engaging to anything, you need to have the knowledge and wisdom about it. However, it's like the theory part.
Yeah.
But then again, while you are engaged, you have to also, at the same time, it's also the time that you are bearing Allah in mind and heart. For example, if you're in a debate, and the atmosphere pressurizes you to refute the opponent, no matter how, no matter what. Okay, so that's your nafs pushing you to do something in the debate to basically to bring everything towards your favor. But at the same time, your heart and what your teachings tells you that you need to stay calm and just keep reasoning with your opponent. So this is how you are in the middle of the action, but at the same time you are you're basically practicing. You're also practicing self-control,
Exactly,
or having Allah in mind and heart. That's how I understand it. Thanks very much.
Hassan, it's a beautiful answer, and it injects the point of knowledge, which is very relevant to taking the right kind of stance. So that's a very important point. Anybody else want to add to that? How you would answer respect to Sister Zahra's question? Okay. So, because I've been thinking about this quite a lot, based on kind of my employment and also my research areas. Here's how I look at it. Ilm and amal come from the same root, okay? The same letters even. Ilm and amal, knowledge and action. They are of the same reality. What you think in your mind and what you have, worked on internally, and what you do are both things you're answerable for. Some ulama say that when you're raised, I think it's Al Hassan Zadeh. Is it Al Hassan Zadeh Amali? Yeah. I don't remember. And I think it's Al Hassan Zadeh. He says that when you're raised, your ilm and amal are like bricks in pieces of brick in a wall, and you are that wall. And it's composed of your knowledge and your actions all fit together. Like that's all you are. That's all we actually have. The things that we know and the things that we do, right? And by ilm, my knowledge, I don't just mean in your mind, I mean in your heart, what you have realized on your journey. So they're together. And it should never be that we have ilm and we don't allow it to become amal. So if I have knowledge of an issue which someone is doing wrong in front of me, I have a fard, for example, amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar. So it inevitably makes me have to act. And similarly, like Brother Pedrock said, no amal, no action should be without ilm. It should never be without ilm, without knowledge. Mainly because if you might not have the right niyyah, if you don't have a niyyah for an action, who is it for? People can do many amazing things externally, but that will not be counted for the sake of God if Allah was not part of it. And even if it is counted, because we do believe that Allah accepts the good deeds of non-Muslims to some degree, they have some justice. It's not ibadah in the way that if you intend to do this for Allah, then it's a whole different type of action. When my niyyah is I'm doing this for God, or I see this as part of my fard to the mustadafin, or to charity, or to like part of my zakat or something, no, then like this thing becomes a whole different type of action, all because of your niyyah. So these things have to always be together, ilm and amal. Now, in general, in order to have the right niyyah, and in order to know what amal comes from which ilm, you have to get knowledge. That usually comes first, because action without knowledge is not the same as action with knowledge, right? So you have to gain knowledge, and knowledge of yourself is the first part or the most important part of knowledge, nafs of the self. And of course, that's linked to knowledge of God. And then naturally, the more you learn about yourself and Allah, you find yourself seeing opportunities for ibadah. And the more you remember God, you remember other people. We call this dhikr amali, right? You have dhikr of Allah, you remember God, but then you have dhikr amali where you're doing actions in which remind you back of God again. So helping the poor when you're thinking of God takes you back to Allah. But you begin by knowing God. You have to know him first to do those actions for him. You have to know God. You have to know who he is. I have done so much humanitarian work with people who do it for all sorts of different reasons, okay, especially non-Muslims as well. And they're doing great work, but they never attribute their actions for anything, some of them for something larger or some origin or some purpose. It's just for the sake of the action, which is good. And then it begins and ends with the amal itself. Whereas when you do something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, he helps you before you do it, and after you do it, the action has barakah in it. So in general, and look at how we've structured the book club. That shows my opinion. We started off looking at spirituality, and now we've come to politics. And we haven't even come to it yet, because I believe you need to do that stuff first in order to get there. But here's one consideration to Sister Zahra. I don't believe we are in normal times right now, where we have the license to take our time to get through this process. Our people are in pain. Our people are dying. And when your house is burning, you don't debate or discuss or retreat. You have to dive in and do whatever you can to save yourself and your loved ones inside. Okay? There is no chance, there's no time. And I don't think we realize the level of the emergency mode we're in right now, and we should be. The issues happening in Palestine, okay, they cropped up for a moment, but they're still happening now. So we should all be doing something towards them. And the issues in Yemen, okay, if I've not got a substantial project right now where it's part of my spirituality, and I've got through the stage I'm mentioning where I'm talking to Allah about people of Yemen and all those things, okay, but I should still do something because they're in an emergency. So I make this distinction now to say that we are currently in a crisis in so many areas that whatever little we do, we have to try and make sure it's helpful. And yes, we have to then go back to Allah and mention the dua of the oppressed and ask the oppressed to do dua for us and make that part of our spirituality. But even if you're not feeling it, we have to do something because people are suffering. We have to get non-Muslims to do something. So my point is, ideally, to Sister Zahra, we start off with our qalb, and the more we gain knowledge of ourselves, we start seeing more and more of these opportunities to worship Allah in our amal. But practically, even if I've not got there yet, I believe we're in such an intense state of emergency for the believers around the world. We have to act and hope, and try our best, but we have to do something. We can't just not go out. We can't just not donate. We can't just not do those things and mention we have to work on ourselves. We have to, we have to do something. That's just my approach. Sister Zahra, what is your approach on this? What do you think? Do you think these two should be done in conjunction, or there should be a process, or how do you see it? You used to think it was a circle. Okay. So one feeds into the other. Interesting. So assuming you begin with ilm and then you do amal and then the amal makes you go back to ilm. Is that what you mean? So you start with the soul. Okay. I want to hear more. I'm actually very curious. So you start with the soul. But you agree with what I explained about sense of emergency. Okay. Okay. So yeah, but you agree that we start esoterically and then we become exoteric. We start internally and then we understand the external better. I think that's a more natural way of doing things. It's a more healthy way of understanding why we do certain amal. But yeah, like we're not in ordinary circumstances. We're in the time of ghaiba. I mean, the time we're in now is not for normal circumstances by any stretch. So we can try hard at this in our own, our own ways. But the stakes are so high. The stakes are so high. But I think me and you, like, we both want to start with the soul and internal. So that's real good to know. If anyone else has any opinion on this, please feel free to mention it. In the next section, this comes up again, and I'll mention it very quickly. So the Imam then he continues to speak to Malik and explains to him that Malik, you're going to an area where there were governments before you, and the governments before you, they were oppressive. And people are going to criticize you, thinking you are like previous rulers. But I need you to to have virtue, because those with virtues are known by Allah. ويقولون فيك ما كنت تقول فيهم إنما يستدل على الصالحين بما يجري الله لهم على ألسنهم عبادهم. Okay, yeah. The tongues of the people are going to speak about what actions that you do, and Allah will circulate your reputation by their tongues. Okay, so then there's real practical advice for all of you, which is فليكن حب الذخائر إليك ذخيرة على عمل الصالح. So that's why you need to collect with yourself the best deeds and the best actions. You need to have control of yourselves. فَامْلِكْ هَوَاكَ, control your passions. وَشُهُ بِنَفْسِكَ عَمَّا لَا يَحِلُّ لَكَ. So you need to control your hearts from not doing anything which is not lawful towards you. فإن الشح بالنفس الإنصاف منها فيما أحبت وكراهت. So check your heart, because this means it is detaining it halfway between what it likes and dislikes. Keep yourself in that equal point between what it likes and dislikes. And Allah Azza wa Jalla will be the one who helps you in that moment. So work on your heart again. So here's a difference. Me and you need to work on our hearts in order to be positive members of society. Yeah. Malik needs to work on his heart because he's in charge. So his responsibility is so much higher in terms of political governance. And that's why the need for him to regulate his qalb is like much greater, because there's so much more temptation for him to make a mistake. And here's an example of temptation which could come to him. Imam Ali Islam says, وَاشْعِرْ قَلْبَكَ الرَّحْمَةَ الرَّعِيَّةَ. So make sure you have rahmah, mercy in your heart for those people who are your ra'iyya, your subjects, and those who are in control over you. وَالْمُحَبَّةِ لَهُمْ. So try and have kindness for them, and muhabba and love for them. وَلُطْفُ بِهِمْ, and kindness and generosity towards them. وَلَا تَكُونَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ سُبْعًا ذَرِيًّا تَغْتَنِمُ أَكْلَهُم. And don't be like a beast who stands over them greedy enough to devour them. I mean, don't be so harsh, you're ready to destroy your people for what you want. Why? Amma, know something. فَإِنَّهُمْ صِنْفَانِ, they are one of two types. إِمَّا أَخٌ لَكَ فِي الدِّينِ وَإِمَّا نَذِيرٌ فِي الْخَلْقِ. Either they are your brothers and sisters in faith, or they are your equals in humanity. It's from here. يَفْرُطُ مِنْهُمَ الزَّعَلُ. Right? They're going to make mistakes. They're going to commit errors. وَتُعْرِضُ لَهُمَ الْعِلَلِ. And they're going to encounter wrongdoings and mistakes. They're going to slip up. يُعْتَى عَلَى أَيْدِيهِمْ فِي الْعَمَدِ وَالْخَطَأِ. And they may act wrongfully by will or by neglect. And they're going to come to you with mistakes. So what should you do? فَاعْتَمَهِمْ مِنْ عَفْوِكَ وَسَفْحِكَ مِثْلَ الَّذِينَ تُحِبُّونَ أَنْ يُعْتِيَكَ اللَّهُ مِنْ غَفُورِهِ وَسَفْحِهِ. So pardon them in the same way that you want Allah to extend his pardon to you. Have that approach where you want to be an afu for them, because you want God to forgive you for your sins too, don't you? And then he gives an example. وَوَالِهِ الْأَمْرُ إِلَيْكُمْ فَوْقَكَ. Because you, فَإِنَّهُ فَوْقَكُمْ, because you're above them, Malik. وَوَالِهِ أَمْرُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَوْقَهُ. And your wali, Amr, is upon you, right? Wallahu fawqa min walak, and Allah is above both of us. So there's no escaping this thing of wanting to be forgiven. I'm above you, and Allah is above both of us. So we need to have that approach. And it ends by saying, وَقَدْ اسْتَكْفَاكَ أَمْرَهُمْ وَأَبْتَلَاكَ بِهِمْ. So Allah has asked you to manage his affairs. He's given you this job, and he's tried you among them. أَسْتَكْفَاكَ أَمْرَهُمْ. Right? Your amr is a test for them. وَابْتَلَاكَ بِهِمْ. And they're being tried through you. And I like this part as well. It's like, Malik, look, be kind to them because you want God to be kind to you. And I'm above you. Remember that someone's above you. And God's above both of us. I really like the tone of this sentence. But let's go back to that famous line. A person is either your brother in faith, or akhun here means brother, but it can mean brother or sister in faith, or your equal in humanity. We have heard this phrase so much. Like so much. In fact, Brother Muhammad Ismail, who I think came and left, we did a session before this book club at Surrey University, and I asked everyone, like, what's your favorite saying of Nahjal Balagha, or just saying in general of the Imam, right? And this one came up a lot. A person's either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. It was so present because we've all heard it around us so far. I would like to ask all of you a question. How do you use that phrase in your actual life? A person is either your brother or sister in faith or your equal in humanity. We've seen how it's been applied to Malik. How do you apply it in your life? Has there been a time where you have used it, or you've mentioned to a non-Muslim, or has helped you understand the situation? A person's either your sibling in faith or equal in humanity. Has it ever come up for any of you before? Come on, this phrase is so famous. A person's either your sibling in faith or equal in humanity. You must have said it to a non-Muslim at some point. You must have heard it or seen it on a poster or something. Like, what's its value for us today? What does that how does that help us in our communities today, do you think, that phrase? Any ideas? No? Fidak, what do you think? It is easy to limit your help to others who do not share your beliefs, but this saying really opens up your mind to treat people with generosity. I've noticed, by the way, that if I speak fast, people on the video, like they don't hear it. So I'll say it again. Fidak has written, it is easy to limit your help to others who do not share your beliefs, but this saying really opens your mind to treat people with generosity. Good, Fidak. That's true. Sometimes we become very exclusivist in who we want to help and who we want to extend our hands to. They've got to be similar to us or like us in order for us to want to help them. And sometimes that means my race. Sometimes that means like literally they've got to be Shi'i, Ithni Ashari, I don't know, Ja'fari, from my center, from my community, my same ethnicity, my same race. My family knows them from back home from the same village. Like, in order for me to actually be generous to them, they've got to be so similar to me. And that's a very conditional way of caring for someone. That's applying so many shurut and conditions on someone just to extend help to them. But like you mentioned, we've got to be generous with them. We've got to be generous to them because they are one of two categories. Min sinfan. They can only be two. So if they're not my brother or sister in faith, they are at least my equal in humanity. And there's no escaping our equality and our common humanity. We share insaniya. We share it. We are from that same origin. It doesn't matter if our beliefs are different. They're not my brothers and sisters, but they are something. So I remember when Sayyid Sistani came out and said that don't talk about your to Shia, don't talk about Sunnis as being separate to you. Say they are anfusihim, they are from yourselves. People are like, yeah, but how is that even possible? How can Sayyid Sistani say something like that? That Sunnis are from yourselves. But it's at least from the second, if not the first of these. That no, we are equals. We are of one origin. Even if we have later on had disagreements in our ideology, our beliefs, we share at least the origin. And that should give us humanity. And that was at a time when there was so much, civil war in Iraq, especially between Sunni and Shi'i. It was needed to have that reminder. I mean, now we need that too in the level of, hostility we bring to one another, especially in polemics, that they are equal in humanity, even if we disagree with some of their beliefs. But the patriarch is about this phrase that people are either your equal in faith or your brother, your sibling in faith, or equal in humanity. It's like, where have we ever seen that? So Felix mentioned he's seen that in Why We Need to Be Generous to People. Has anyone else got that phrase or thinks of a utility or some value of that phrase, that hadith, in maybe your life or somewhere you have seen it being used or where it should be used? No problem, Brother Patriarch. But any others, while you're listening, where should this idea be more prevalent, this distinction? Since it has mentioned, it is all encompassing. There's not a single person who should be left out of your service. Exactly. If we all act in accordance with this, it would form the foundation of a strong society, and so consequently paving the way for Imam Mahdi. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And the first part is the same as Fidak's, which is no one is left out of service. Right? No one is excluded, right, from help. Like, that's true. But look at the second part. It's about how we build a society. And our society does not begin with that as its foundation. That's not the starting point, that we are all of the same value. No, some societies are built on the inherent differences of people, either built on racism, or they're built on fascism, or they're built on capitalist tendencies, which create classes between people, where some classes are worth more and have more value than other values. They are literally the ideologies behind almost all of the societies which we're interacting in. Look at the UK, look at the West, look at European society, look at this Eurocentric view, where when these countries were in the position of colonial power, human beings were worth being sold like slaves and subjugated, and their wealth taken away from them. And that same wealth was used to build up these great cities of London and Paris and Brussels and Berlin, like and Amsterdam. Like, these cities were literally forged from the wealth of colonial exploits, because they believed that people are of different values and some are just have a greater right to life than others. Look at ethnic cleansing, right? When one society deems it necessary or important for itself and allowed to literally wipe out another. Look at the idea of wiping out a people entirely to build on their land, your own country, your own nation, in the past and the present. This comes from an idea that some people don't have value. They don't have the right to the same autonomy that I do, right? These are all ideologies. But if we swap them with this one, like just this one in that place, that person is min sinfan, either they are your akhun fidin, they're your brother or sister in faith, or they're equal in humanity, that changes my whole approach. Everything is different now, because I have an obligation to recognize value in people. And as for your last point, says Zahra, and this paves the way for the 12th Imam, exactly. Because if we go to the 12th Imam with an exclusivist view, what we're thinking is, I want the 12th Imam to return, and so does everyone else in this majlis or this gathering. But the non-Muslim on the street has nothing to do with him because they don't even believe in the wilayah of Imam Ali, Islam, let alone the 12th Imam. And it's like, well, hang on a second. That methodology excludes the majority of all people who have ever lived, and what they have nothing to do with the 12th Imam. That's not fair. But if you start by saying, no, either the person who wants the Imam is my brother in faith, or they were equal in humanity, and the 12th Imam can be a help for them. He will destroy the pillars of oppression and uproot them and put justice in. He'll be fair and equitable. And non-Muslims will have as much care for him as Muslims. If I think like that, then I'm going to the Imam with my community with me. It's a very different methodology, right? And it means that we want to help people on this journey and not make ourselves feel like we are the only ones going there. Sister Kawthar has added, opening yourself, back to the phrase, opening yourself up and offering your services, help, kindness to those who are a different faith. This includes working together for a common goal and helping those who are oppressed around the world. Something very good, very good. So again, so we're all starting with the same point, which is being kind and helping people and offering our services. And we're seeing that when you start with that generosity, just being generous, that leads to a number of different avenues, okay? This includes working together towards a common goal, like helping those who are oppressed around the world. Yeah. So if we are making stances right now for genuinely oppressed people in the world, right, we need to build coalitions with people to get this done. I'll give you an example. The case of Sheikh Zakzaki, who was recently, alhamdulillah, released from prison. I don't know if the community is ready to discuss how this happened, but it wasn't just with Shi'i. It wasn't. We had help. We had help from NGOs who are non-Muslim. Letters were written from Western countries to high-ranking officials. Other campaigns, which are on different grounds for oppression in Nigeria, supported the campaign. And although one of the critiques was earlier that we were not doing enough to build coalitions, it seems like the actual people who were responsible for helping the Sheikh being released had built very positive relationships with those who did not have the same ideology as them. And the only way you're going to help the oppressed, and this is just one example, in the modern world, in a world of globalism, is to build the right type of stances and alliances with people. And I can't build an alliance with someone if I don't value their inherent rights to exist, or their right to agency, or their right to have success in this issue, just because they're not Shi'i or they're not from my faith, for example. So yeah, strategically, Sister Kawthar, you're right. Like, we can just get loads more done and achieve more working with non-Muslims. Like in my profession, in my work with refugees and homeless people, I have had more support in this role from non-Muslim entities than Muslim entities, let alone Shi'i, who are actually working on this on the ground. So we have to work with what we've got, and it's not a lot. And this helps us. This helps us realize that. Because you all mentioned generosity, I want to ask all of you a question. And this is actually a hadith, right? What do you think is greater, generosity or justice? Now, you're not allowed to look at saying 437 of Nahjal Balagha, because that's where the answer is from the Imam. But think to yourself, what's greater? What is better? Adl, to have justice, right? Or to be generous? What do we think? Have a little think about it. Adl or Jud? Pedrak has an idea. Brother Pedrak, what do you think? What's greater?
I think if I understand correctly, justice or ad is better.
Why?
And because through justice, you know how to be generous in the right amount, in the correct way. I'm saying that based on the ayah 135 from Surah Nisa, where it says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها المؤمنون كونوا قوامين بالقسط. Sorry. In the continuation, in this ayah, Allah says that we should be.
I can't hear you, Brother Pedrak. I don't know if it's just me. Pedrak? His audio was cut out. Yeah, it wasn't just me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, sorry. So
Hey, it went out again just when you came back. What's going on?
That
Petrarch,
he,
your audio keeps coming and going, but for some reason, when you're not mentioning the point, it's fine. When you start mentioning the point, it just cuts out.
okay. Maybe I think my signal could. Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, quickly.
Okay, so yeah, something is wrong. I don't know what. So the ayah says that in order to help poor people, you have to maintain being justice even when you help poor people, so you don't help them in a wrong way or overwhelm them or.
Yeah, good. Oh no, I don't know if you finished or if you cut out. The audio has cut just in case you are still talking. But
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. Had you finished the point or you're still going?
So basically, I'll just finish it. So, for example, if you give a poor person a job which he is not fit for it, you haven't, you basically haven't done that guy a favor. So that's why I think justice comes first.
Okay, Petrarch, inshallah, I'm glad the point was made. Believes that justice is better because of that point about um and helping the oppressed means doing their rights to them, right? And that's the instruction for that. Okay, interesting view. Fidak, you've written that. Couldn't you say that being just generous in most scenarios is justice? I wouldn't say that. What do you mean by that? Unless I misunderstand what you're saying. Could you explain that a little bit further?
What I mean by that is, so if you're talking about God's justice, so God is all merciful, so it would be just for him to be very generous. So that's kind of what I mean.
So we have the rahmah of God, God's mercy, and we have the adl of God, God's justice. And so what you're saying is because God is merciful, because God is merciful, he will always be merciful, or his mercy will always be just. How do you think those two things work together?
I think whenever he is merciful, that is his justice as well. Like he never it's kind of a hard thing to explain, but I think they kind of go hand in hand as well. So when God gives someone his mercy, he deserves that mercy in God's perspective. So in that way, it's just.
We read in one of our du'as that Allah, your adl will ruin me, or if you were to use your adl against me, I'd be ruined. Okay, and then we say, and so I appeal to your mercy instead.
Okay.
If me and you and all of us, well, I speak for myself, if we were raised according to our actions, do we think by right we deserve to go to heaven? And many people will answer, no. Like I do some good deeds, but I do a lot of bad deeds. And I'm not like the mu'minin in the Quran. I'm not like the muttaqin. Like I'm not those guys. I'm trying maybe I'm trying, but sometimes I'm not trying. Like I'm not like that. So if it's about adl and everyone will see the good and bad that they do, I'm in trouble. So that's why we say like my adl will finish me off. But then we say in that case, Allah have rahmah on me, have mercy on me. That when I make a mistake, even though by right I don't deserve heaven, I don't deserve it. I have not done enough to be as good as I could be. Please help me along the way. Treat me with your mercy. Overlook my sins. Take me with you. Take me to your khuld without me deserving it. Do you see the distinction between adl and rahm in that dua?
Yeah.
Right. So the question then is, okay, Fidak, the question then is, day-to-day life, right? What's better? I treat people with justice or I treat them with generosity?
Generosity.
So Fidak thinks generosity. Petrarch thinks adl, justice. Kauthar thinks, I like Brother Pedrag's point. Generosity without justice is useless in situations where you have to choose between the two. You should always choose justice. Okay, so Kauthar is on team Adil. Pedrag, is your hand raised again?
Yes, I think the comparison needs to be reviewed. When in dua, we ask Allah to judge us out of His mercy, not justice, the source of both of them is from the perfection being, which is Allah. Okay, but we, as a human being, we are not perfect. We can, we can make mistakes in our judgment or in our action. So, for example, if we recite that dua, okay, it means that we are asking Allah to have His generosity, but also we have to bear in mind that that's not the only statement from Allah. For example, Haqqun Nas, the right of people, even Allah cannot, will not forgive it. Okay, do you have Haqqullah, for example, I don't know, some missed prayers probably, or some missed du'as and things like that. Yes, for those, there is a chance that Allah will do something about it for us. But when it comes to Haqqun Nas, I don't know, people's credibility or their lives or something, okay? Allah clearly says that, even if you are a martyr in my way, that Haqqun Nas cannot be cleared. Okay, so but focusing on this point, I think again we have to focus on justice in our generosity towards others. Okay, because this is how Allah wants us to be generous. Okay, so we have a command from Allah to maintain the justice even in being generous. Okay, in the case of Allah Himself, because that mercy and the justice is from the same source, from a perfect source, yes, but I mean, again, that's a completely different scenario, I believe.
Yeah, I want to make sure when I say between Adil and Jud, I don't mean God's justice and God's mercy. Like I mentioned the example to make the point clear to Fidak, but this is not about what's greater, God's justice or God's mercy. This is about me and you in treating someone else with justice or treating someone else with generosity. So, like they are different things. They are different things. But but even in applying me and you, your argument is that it is just to always do generosity to people. Am I right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, like just to clarify, is that your position?
It is always just to
be generous to people. Yeah, to help people, to be generous, and to have that
no. My position is that our generosity must be governed by justice.
Okay. Yeah. So Adil comes first. That's the prime thing. Okay, very good. Thank you for making that clear for me and for the rest of us. Sister Kauthar has added, similarly, only Allah can have that perfect balance between generosity and justice. Exactly. We can never reach that level of balance. And so in each situation, we need to present it. We need to choose the most appropriate one. That's right. So like I mentioned before, this is not about God's justice and God's mercy. This is about me and you doing adl on someone else or doing jud, doing generosity on someone else. Okay. There's a mix. There's a mix of views out there. I can see them. Sister Alia, thank you so much for your kind words, and inshallah, take care. Thank you for joining us so far. I just got a message. Thank you. What's better, having adl on someone or being generous towards someone? Okay, we've answered about from Allah because God is the most perfect being. I mentioned the distinction just to show they're not the same thing, just in case that was being mentioned earlier. What does the Imam say? Okay, well, actually, in Nahjal Balagha, the Imam also says that insaf Allah wa insaf an-nas, like you mentioned, Pedrag, do justice to God and justice to the people. Like he makes those things very clear; they are separate things. In insaf an-nas, in being just to the people, what's better, adl or jud? So in the Imam's narration in saying 437, Imam says he was asked once that Amma Husnan, which one is better, Adl aw Jud? And he answers them that Adl puts things in their place, whilst Jud, generosity, وخرج من مقام, takes things out of their place. Okay? Justice is the general caretaker, and Adl is the khas benefit that something should have. Consequently, justice is superior and the more distinguished of the two. Why? Because justice is general. That's the baseline. And in some examples, you take something out of its normal correct place to do extra for them. But the baseline, the general, the standard is adl when you treat someone. And by adl, what's the definition the Imam gives? Is to put everything in its place. So if we believe in insaf Allah wa insaf nas and haqq Allah wa haqq nas, we believe that everything, whether it's me or you and whether it's God, has its own huquq, its own rights. And if you want to go into more detail, look at the Risalat al-Huquq of Imam Sajjad. Everything's got its own rights and huquq. And everything must be treated as a general baseline in accordance to its general right of where it belongs. We believe that strongly and firmly. Now, if you and I want to take something out of its limits to go further, that's generosity. And if we do that to go less, that's dhulm, because we've deprived it of its correct place. But for the Imam, the general, because it is all encompassing, is greater. And the particular example of generosity is not as good. The reason why it's not as good actually is because it's not always good to take something out of its limit. So if Salat al-Layl is 11 rak'ah, taking it out of its limit just because I love God a lot is not Salat al-Layl anymore. It's the quality of the 11 rak'ah altogether in which the salat is found, right? If fasting for the month of Ramadan, Shahr Ramadan, is like the huquq of the month that we should fast, me fasting through the entire year, not because it's mustahab, but just because I want to extend my Ramadan for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months with niyyah wajib because I think it's part of Ramadan, month of Ramadan. That's not the point of it. The point is to work hard and prepare and take provision from this month. And then yes, fast in other months, which is recommended, but don't try and decide what to do of your own accord. If Allah says do worship of Adam, for me or for Iblis to say, I'd rather not worship, I want to worship you instead. And when Allah says, no, this is the obligation on you. And Shaitan says, I'll worship you in a way that no one has ever worshipped you before. That's not an appropriate time to be generous. That's a time to do adl. But when me and you are giving charity and we're told to give 2.5% of zakah, but when I go out, I see another poor person who I didn't give my zakat to give sadaqah to them, even if it's little, is generosity when it should be done. So for the Imam, sometimes be generous, sometimes don't be generous. As in generosity of this definition of going above the limit is not appropriate. But adl is always appropriate. There's no circumstance where I'm not fulfilling someone's rights. I don't get to do that. So that's why it's greater in the eyes of the Imam. If you want to read more about his explanation, go to hadith number 437 in Nahjal Balagha. Does the answer make sense, especially to Zahra, Fidak, and Pajwak, and anyone else who was thinking about it? Does it make sense to you guys? Anyone want to add to that? Or it makes sense? Says, I've got a thumbs up from Sister Zahra. Fidak, Pajwak, are you satisfied with the Imam's approach to this issue? If not, you can say, well, why is Imam not taking this position? You are free to ask about it if you're not too sure. Okay, I'll take your silence as your approval. Okay, so that's the beginning of that's the beginning of the letter. Then the Imam speaks a bit more about what the rights of the ruler are and what the huquq are of the ruler. That was my initial point, but your explanation makes make me want Allah's generosity. Yeah, that is such a good point. Read this comment, guys, from Fidak. Yes, that was my initial belief, but your explanation made me want Allah's generosity. Like, I want Allah to go above what is in my limit of my amal and to fill in the extra. Like, I want his mercy on me. Because if it's just by adl, I'm being judged purely for my ilm and my amal, my knowledge and my actions. Maybe they're not good enough to get me over the line, but I want Allah to have Jud on me. And that's why he is, of course, the one who is Jawad as well. He is the generous one, Al Jawad. And that's why we call upon him for his mercy. That's a very insightful point, Fidak. I'm glad you made that conclusion. So, yeah, so the Imam continues in different points of this letter about the rights of how Malik should be acting, including how he treats people, how wa'malu bil adl, make sure you do every action by having adl, by having justice. He speaks about people and what people are like and how to make a society, a ideal society. And then he goes through 7 different groups of people. And I've not got a whole lot of time, so I'll be very quick with them. 7 classes of people. And he mentions to Malik, in your society, in your community, all of these 7 are going to have certain rights, certain huquq. And you have to give respect to all of them. Now, what I'll do is I'll quickly go through each 7 one, and then we'll close. And I will ask each and every single one of you if you relate to this particular type of work. Here's an example. The first of the 7 type is the army. Okay, so for Malik, he's been told to put in command the certain type of people in the army and be careful of who gets to fight in the army. Now, this is for anyone in general, this first part, because we are told the mu'min is like an army in themselves. And all of us are fighting our own internal struggles, and we should be able to have the discipline of a warrior in us. So Malik is told, make sure you choose someone to in your army who is in your view the best wish of Allah and his Prophet, and the one who has afdalahum hilm, the best of regard, of hilm, of forbearance, mimman yubti'u anil ghadab, and is the easiest one who does not get angry quickly. Someone like this. They accept excuses, they are kind to those who are weak, وَيَرَافُ بِالضَّعْفَ وَيَنْبُ عَلَى الْأَقْوِيَاءِ, and they are ready to be strict when they are strong. And violence does not make them angry, and their weakness does not keep them sitting down, meaning they are strong, but they know when to use their strength. And the army, the Imam says, is the fortress of the subjects of the Ra'iyya. They all have a fixed rank and role in them. They have a fixed fund in them. And they have in it different people of different backgrounds who come together from different classes. And the ruler must pay respect to all of them. And then there must be a commander of them, okay? وليكن آثاره رؤوس جندك عندك من أساءهم في معتنها. The commander of the army must have a great position amongst all of them, where he spends the money from the army on the people of the army and their families left behind, and they are kind. And Malik, you be kind to them. Be like a father to them, he says. Be like a father to them. Because anything you do which is small, they'll remember. And if you overlook a big fault of theirs, they will remember this also. So there's more there, but the first part is we have to be of this mentality where I'm thinking I'm like a soldier for the Imam, okay? And I'm trying to fulfill as many of the qualities of an ideal soldier as found in this part. If you want to go in more detail, please look at this first section. But now we go to certain specific roles, and here I'm interested in your view. So the second group is the judges, the chief judge. Now, if you can, please raise your hand if you work in a role where you're making decisions, or you're studying a subject which, if you get the job you want, you'll be in a position where you're actually going to make certain decisions that will affect people. Raise your hand in the chat just so I know if you identify with that. Someone who's currently working or is going to work in a role where you're making decisions. So Kawthar, if anyone else, please raise your hand in the Zoom chat just so you can, so I can see. So Kawthar is one, definitely. Are there any others who are in a position or in a role where you want to be in a job where you're going to be making decisions? If you are, so we have one already, the Imam speaks about the judges, the one who's going to be making and ruling over the people. He says, when you choose the judge, Malik, make sure you choose the most distinguished from your subjects. So to be a judge or to choose and make judgments requires to be of a high level. What kind of level? The Imam says, the judge, the cases should not vex him. People disputing should not enrage him. You shouldn't insist on wrong points or accept or grudgingly accept the truth when he doesn't want to. He should not lean towards greed or be content with only knowing a little bit about a subject. He should stop and ponder on shubuhat and regards full of hujjaj, of arguments which are currently coming towards him. He should probe matters, or he or she, and be fearless in the time of passing judgment. Praise should not make them vain, and elation should not make them lean. And then he says, Malik, just so you know, ulaika qalil. There's few people who are actually like this. So that's what it takes to be a good decision maker when your actions affect others. You don't get worried when there's disputes. You think hard, and when you give judgment, you are firm and you are strong. If anyone's working in law or in role or in management, for example, we need to have firm decisions, but it comes from being afdalu min ra'iyati, being the most distinguished. So we have to work hard to get to that level. I don't want to go into more detail, but if you're interested in how to be a good decision maker, in that way, go to this part of letter 53. Okay. Third is the executive officers. Who here works in a role where you employ someone, or where someone works under you, or you want to qualify in a job which will necessarily require you to manage people? Anyone of that group? Think about what subjects you're studying and why you're studying it and what job comes from it. If there is a job which will come in which will require you to manage staff, for example, pay attention to this point, okay? Number 3 is the executive officers. These are the people, they are the ones who actually do the actions which you're giving. He says, give them appointments after tests, and don't appoint them just because they're because of favoritism, okay, or being unfair to them. Select them when they have experience and modesty. And if they come from bayutun salih, from virtuous houses, which used to be in Islam, or they possess high manners and good honor, they should always be thinking of the end of the matters. Malik can give them a good salary, good strength to control themselves, check their activities, report on them, be truthful, and be careful of their assistance, right? Don't allow any of them to extend their hands towards anything which is not ordained for them, any misappropriation. So if you're governing people, think of this point. And then he says, if something was taken unlawfully under one of your assistants, inflict a punishment on him, blacklist him, and make him wear the necklace of shame for his offense. For their tawma, for their offense, they should have a necklace of shame. So if you're managing staff and you're thinking, how do I manage people? The answer is in this way: with fairness, with true justice, and you select people and you test people and you interview people, not based on favoritism, but based on quality. Imam says, give them appointments ba'd al-imtihan, after tests, after you've shown their value to you, and keep watching over them. Okay, that's the third group. The fourth group is anyone whose role it is to manage money. So if you're in a job now where you've got to manage money, manage wealth, whether you're at the till working in a shop, or doing finances for someone, or collecting receipts, or banking, or accounting, or anything like this. The fourth is those who administer revenues. واتفقت أعمار الخراج بما يصلح أهله. Look after those who collect the tax and the revenue, and be engaged in their prosperity. Keep an eye on the cultivation of land and the collection of revenue from the land. And there's an important principle here, which is ومن طالب الخراج بغيره عمارة الأخراج البلاد أخراب البلاد وأحلك العباد ولم يستقم أمره إلا قليلا, which is that whoever asks for a revenue of a piece of land without doing any work on it, or without any work, they ruin the area and they bring death to the people, and their rule only lasts for a moment. Meaning, don't try and gain wealth from something you had nothing to do with, or you have no cultivation has been in that place. So in collecting revenue, always be mindful of where the money is coming from. Remember this. And if someone's bringing money to you, the Imam says, if they complain to you, this revenue is too heavy, be kind to them. If they want a remission from you, grant it, because when you need them, they'll remember it to you. So if you're in a role where you got to manage money, remember how you manage that wealth is something you're accountable for. Fifth is if you work in as a secretary or as an assistant or in what the Imam calls the clerical establishment. So these are those guys who are doing admin. So if you're on a role where you're doing admin, for example, or you have people doing admin for you, or there's admin happening around you, Imam says take care of those people في حال كتابك, who are the secretarial workers. Entrust your letters with them, give them your secrets, the careful of the secrets you give to them, and make sure they're not someone who speaks against you in common, right? Don't be negligent in presenting communications to your officers from you and exchanging the right replies among you. So sometimes things get lost in translation when in admin an email is sent to the wrong person or the wrong person CC'd in, or just we're not communicating our points of view in an accurate way. This is important to the Imam. He mentions it now. He says they should not be making an agreement against you which you're not aware about. And they should not be ignorant of their own position, because the one who's ignorant of their own position is obviously going to be ignorant of other people's positions. So Imam says, select them based on understanding and confidence. And remember, Malik, people are going to know you through them because they're the ones they're going to meet out and about. So if you've employed someone who's doing even admin for you, or you're doing admin for someone else, you are a representative of that person. You become a rep for them. In your conduct, they're going to judge the company that you work for. Imam says, remember this, test them by what they did under the people before you and take a decision in favor of the one who has earned their good name of trustworthiness. And the Imam says, give each of them a different department of work, meaning division of labor. And they should not be incapable of the matters you've given them. They should not be worried by doing a lot of rush, a lot of work. And when there's a defect in the work that's being done, don't overlook it because you'll be responsible for it. So that's if you're working in admin or someone's about to work in admin. And the penultimate one is anyone who's working in business. So if you're working in business in making money, either yourself or what you're studying will lead you to that field like naturally, or you want to go into finance or something where you are earning business. Imam says, take care of those who are business people and those who work as industrialists. He says, give them good advice and good conduct. If they are settled like shopkeepers, or those people who are physical laborers, all those who are traveling for the sake of work, like traveling business people. Look after all of them, Malik, because when they go to far areas or near areas, whether people come to them or they don't come to them, or there's fear or there's not revolt, you are responsible for all of them. So look after their affairs before you look after your own affairs. Even if they're in your area, know who they are, know how their minds are, and be careful if they hoard goods or fix high prices for goods. So if you and me are business people, we need to make sure that we are not setting prices which are too high, even though we want to make money. Imam said this is a source of harm for the people, and it is a blot on the officers. So stop them from hoarding, because the Prophet prohibited them. Have a smooth sale with correct weights and prices, neither harmful for any party. And of course, it's not like hoarding either. فمن قارف حكورة بعد نهيك إياه فتكل وعاقبه في غير إسراف. Anyone who hoards or commits hoarding after you prohibit it, give them a punishment. Not too much, not too high, but something. And finally is those who are mustad'afin. So if you work with someone or work with people who are in pain or suffering or ill or unwell, or there is something issue with them, or there's a problem which you're trying to help them with, right? If you're in that kind of role, this is for those who are in the lowest class. ثم الله في الطبقة السفلى من الذين لا حيلة لهم المساكين المحتاجين وأهل البؤس والزمن. Fear Allah, have fear of Allah with respect to those who are of the mustadafin, those who are masakin, those who are poor, those who are penniless, those who are even disabled, he mentions. He says, and Imam says, this is both those who are needy and beg and those who don't. Take care of all of them for the sake of Allah. Take care of Allah for their haqq, because He's made you responsible. Fix them a share from the public funds. So make sure that those who are poor can get something from the public treasury or public funds. because even whether they are remote or they are near, they have rights in your hands, O Malik. Don't live such a luxurious life you're away from them. This is for me and you as well. Don't lose sight of the poor in our society. Take care of their affairs. If they come to you, don't look at them with contempt or regard them as low. And don't appoint for them people who are trusted, who are God-fearing and humble, who report back to you on the poor. So some people's role is just to watch and monitor those who are poor from among our community. Take care of the orphans, those of the aged and have no means for livelihood, and those who are not even strong enough for begging. Even if this is heavy, it is a heavy right which Allah will lighten for you in the akhirah. And Imam then goes on to other examples of ways in which we have rights on the mustad'afin. But it's something which we should all remember, that my role should be in a way in which I'm helping those who are poor. So, and that's the end. And then there's more discussion in this letter on how Malik should be as the mentality of a leader, of a ruler. And if you are interested in that, you can look at other videos in the Nahjal Balagha Book Club. But those are 7 examples. Is anyone listening to that with any questions about anything mentioned of those 7 examples, about how we can embody these principles? I really hope that when it comes to your employment, you're thinking like, how does Imam want me to act in this job? Like, what does he want from me in this role? Because it is that real, it's that dynamic. And I'm glad we could look at letter 53 of Nahjal Balagha, because it is such an important letter. And I hope it has shown to you the link between theory and practice, the link between working on the heart in what might be an abstract way, but when you do actual amal for Allah, you find yourself being a better worker, a better employee, a better manager, a better leader, a better soldier. And I think that's the aim for all of us in this book club, to try and be better for the sake of our Imam. That means we are closing the book club. Are there any final questions about anything discussed today or any of the points in the book club before I close it? Any questions, anything you want me to make clear? Anything which was left, any mistakes or anything, please allow me to offer my my apologies and to clarify if there was anything. Any questions about the sermon, about the letter 53, about anything which came up or anything which you're interested in? Okay, in that case, we will end too soon. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to benefit from you and going through these issues with you. Thank you, Sister. Thank you, Sister Isra, as well. And that's it. Take care, everyone. Remember me in your dua, especially in Muharram as well. If you guys are anywhere in the north or in London, then maybe I will see you or reside somewhere, and it'll be nice, inshallah. But other than that, take care. Thank you, Sister. Thank you for your lovely du'as. I'm reading them now, but I'm too shy to make them read them loudly. And may Allah increase all of your tawfiqat, inshallah, and your barakah. Stay on the WhatsApp group for other updates if you're not on there already. And there will be one tonight or tomorrow, inshallah, on the future of the book club or future of other projects. But today is the 10th of the 10th, and it's done and it's finished. So thank you again to all of you. Remember in your dua. Fi amanillah.
علي ولي الله علي ولي الله علي ولي الله